Well, the time now is 27 minutes to 1, and I welcome into my studio my guest of the day. Delighted to say I'm joined by Paul Bates from Good Riddance Pest Control. Hello, Paul. Thank you for coming in.
Good afternoon, Steve. No problem.
It's very good of Paul to come in because he isn't actually from this region, but he has an interest in this region, and we'll explain all that in a moment. You've got connections with this area. You married your ex-wife locally, didn't you?
Mate. I was married in Knowle in Holy Nativity Church.
Yes, and you used to go to Ashton Gate, I see, to see
I
Bristol
went to
City.
Ashton Gate. In fact, I'm going there in June because there's a business show down here.
Oh, fancy that.
A big business show for Bristol businesses.
I see that you're a big Crystal Palace fan.
I am a very big Crystal Palace fan for my sins.
Yeah, I was so delighted when they didn't go down last season. Of course, they appointed Roy Hodgson, who, one of those blokes you can't dislike.
No, he's a lovely guy, and he's still doing wonders for us. He's kept us in the Premier League for a record season.
Yeah, I see that they're 12th at the moment, which isn't bad at all, is it?
Not bad at all, considering the way they've been playing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they don't need to worry about it now because they're saved from the drop, which is good. But I was just having a look at earlier on to see what the position is, and he's assured fans that they will carry on trying hard to win games in the remaining couple that are coming up.
We do hope so.
Yeah, they are a bit unpredictable. Whenever they're on Match of the Day, because I always ignore the results and just watch it on an evening. I'm always egging them on, but sometimes they throw it away, don't they?
Match of the Day makes it look a lot better than it is if you're a season ticket holder sometimes.
God. Oh, so you go regularly then, do you?
Yeah, I do indeed.
Blimey, right. You also like tennis, I see. How often do you play that?
I play tennis every week, at least twice a week.
Gordon Bennett. And you brought up your son and daughter through their teenage years. Your daughter's a vicar, I see. Where's she based?
She's a vicar in Shrewsbury now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was she always like that as a young one? Did she have an interest in God?
No, she supports Crystal Palace as well.
Well, she got to pray a lot, I suppose.
Yeah, she prays a lot, and she says things to the referees that vicars probably shouldn't say, but...
Dear, oh dear. You, I see, privately also run a little Cub Scout pack, don't you? How did you get involved in that?
The pack was shutting 37 years ago, and it's only 1 hour a week, I was told.
All right. Well, your son was there, was he, I guess?
My son was that. That was after I started.
Oh, right.
I've been doing it 38 years now.
Blimey. I mean, it's a bit of a commitment, isn't it?
Yeah, we take them away once a year for a week. We're down in the New Forest in July this year.
Yeah.
So
do you ever lose any of them?
Try very hard, but no, they keep coming back.
It must be quite rewarding, actually.
It is. The beavers, which are the 6 to 8 year olds, they tend to cry if I shout.
Yes.
The scouts, they just smell and don't do what I want. But the cubs, you take an 8-year-old that's shy, you get them ready for secondary school.
Yeah, I think it's
a lovely
fabulous.
feeling.
I really just do think it adds confidence to them and sort of all-round abilities which they can use in later life.
It does. Well, now Bear Grylls is the chief scout.
Of course,
It's
bit of
done
credibility.
wonders. He's done wonders for the scouting.
I think it's a brilliant thing. Tell me a bit about your background then. Where were you born? Where are you from originally?
Brixton.
Oh,
I was
right.
born in Brixton in London.
Yeah.
Went to school in London. Started working the civil service in the mid-70s.
You found that a bit boring, didn't you?
Yeah, it was certainly civil because it was civil service bars have very cheap beer as a teenager. But it was so boring. It was so overmanned in those days. And I joined what was then the largest pest control company. I won't mention their name, which in the 80s was the best company in Europe to work for. They had staff, they had customers, and they looked after them. Yeah,
and you did very well there because you started out as a technician and you got promoted and moved up through the company, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I was a branch manager, but then the accountants came in, as so often happens, and the shareholder was the only person that mattered. And it was affecting health and things like that. So we thought, no, let's start out on our own.
Yeah, now a lot of people do this. They work for a company and they decide that they can do it better themselves. It's a hell of a risk. Did you have misgivings at the time when you launched the company?
No, because I had young children and we believed in the industry. And actually, pest control is a bit like funeral directors. There's always a need.
Yes.
If the economy is booming, then renovations on properties happen and we get pigeon work for proofing buildings against pigeons. When the economy goes down, then rubbish builds up, there's derelict properties and other pests come out. So
yeah, and you also, interestingly, wanted to sort of change the image slightly of pest control, didn't you?
Pest control has this image of the flat cap and the whippet. But actually, we're very technical. And nowadays, because we want to do pest control with the least pesticides and we don't want to affect the environment. So we've won awards over the years now as a green business for using things like motion sensor cameras, using ultraviolet detection so that if a mouse runs through it, you can see where it's gone. So you can, if you're having to poison, you take the poison to where the pest is, as opposed to just scattergun approach of pesticides everywhere.
Well, you launched the company in the mid-90s and
Yeah.
you've grown it. I think you've got a turnover of quite a bit these days, haven't you?
Yeah, the pest control company down here, Good Riddance, is one that we've just bought.
You've bought
Um,
several, haven't you?
we bought several, yeah, and we're up to 43 staff now. We turn over about £3 million in the coming year.
Blimey O'Reilly. And the thing was not only to run a business that was, professional and successful, but also to treat your staff well.
Yeah, we're the only investor in people gold accredited company in England now. Uh, we want our staff. When we started the business, we all had young children. The three of us that started the business, and then a fourth director came. He had young children, and we thought, actually, we want to enjoy going to work. We want to get back home and have our children for us. We don't want to just work ourselves into the ground.
Yeah.
And then we thought, as we take on staff, wouldn't it be nice if we can treat them the same and have them enjoying their work? And that's been our ethos all the way through.
Yeah, well, I think it's absolutely true. If the staff enjoy going to work, they will work harder for the company. When it comes to the
Yeah.
push, when they've got to give that little extra, they'll give it because they'll feel an empathy with the company.
Yeah, and as we've grown over the years, we went through what every company goes through. We had cash flow problems, and we had a serious problem when we had some businesses go under on us, and we just got all the staff in and said, right, this is the situation. We've got to pay you a little bit less for the coming year, and we didn't lose one member of staff. They all stayed with us.
Brilliant. Well, we're going to talk about the various pest animals that you can control and one thing and another. But I just mentioned this local Bristol company. They were called Good Riddance, and this is how I
Yep.
came to you originally. Run by a guy called Howard, who's now retired,
Yep.
and he's known the business inside out for years, hasn't he?
Yeah, I know Howard for about 30 years because he was at the previous company as well.
Yeah.
Another one that left because of the same reasons.
Uh-huh.
But Howard wanted to retire, and he wanted to sell his company to somebody that he knew would look after his staff. And we knew each other, and it just we travelled as Cleankill as far as Swindon, and Good Riddance going up to Bath and on to Swindon seemed a natural fit to us.
Okay, well, let's talk about various animals that can cause a problem for people. And you can tell me about the remedies that you can offer. And none of these animals particularly will surprise people because they've been around for hundreds of years and they've always been a problem. In no particular order, let's start off with ants. I remember years and years ago, I had some tiles loose in the bathroom and I pulled them off and there was an ant's nest behind it. And I couldn't believe how big the ant's nest was. I didn't want to kill the things, but I had to because they'd all come into the bathroom. Tell me a bit about your experience with ants.
Well, ants again, there's so many different kinds of ants. There's
Yeah.
a tropical ant which infests hospitals, blocks of flats that have got central heating going through all the flats. But the one we most commonly deal with is the black garden ant.
Yeah, but they don't cause much trouble, do they? As far as they don't hurt people.
They don't hurt people, but it's the hygiene situation. If they are coming into kitchens, quite often in old people's homes, care homes, where they're at a very hot temperature and people are drinking sweet tea, then you get trails of ants, and they're very difficult to disrupt the trails of the ants.
Yeah, I mean they are extraordinary in animal terms in the way that they have this incredible society where everybody leans on everybody else and they work together almost like a machine.
They're wonderful to watch. My partner loves watching leafcutter ants on the David Attenborough shows because they are so organised. A bit like, well, wasps and bees. Bees are so organised. You watch them working. They've got the same sort of structure as the workers, the queens. They all know and seem to know exactly what they're doing and work together.
What about Flying Ant Day, this one day of the year when they all seem to just suddenly appear in the air? What is that about?
That came last year at Wimbledon. Anybody that was watching Wimbledon last year on Centre Court, when the players were having to swat them away with their rackets, and we were getting calls left, right, and centre. That's the mating flight, and it happens not just on one day a year. It can be 2 or 3 different days of the year. The weather gets very still, very calm, no rain, and then all the males come out trying to find a queen to mate with.
Yeah, it's
Um,
amazing though because they just suddenly appear and then they vanish.
We get loads and loads of calls from people saying, what do we do? And again, an unethical company will say, yeah, we'll come out, 200 quid, we'll spray. But of course, they disappear on their own after 2 hours. And that's what we tell people, just let them disappear.
Now, another animal that you deal with is bed bugs, and that's not something that I would think was a big problem, but I suppose it might be in hotels or dodgy B&Bs or DOS houses. Where do bed bugs crop up?
As a pest, it's one of the ones I hate because they had virtually disappeared about 20, 25 years ago. And then students started taking gap years, travelling across Asian continent, staying in cheap hotels, and you pick up the bed bugs in the cracks and crevices in your backpacks, in your trousers. take them home, and then what appeared to happen was middle-class mummy and daddy didn't want anybody to know they had bed bugs and would try to deal with them themselves. And then, of course, they'd kill 90% of them. The 10% that were left would be resistant to the insecticides, and they would breed, and then the next 90% would be resistant to insecticides. And over the years, it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem. We have to treat occasionally aeroplanes. There's another company that we work with that sends sniffer dogs onto aeroplanes if they're coming back from Asia and Australia, places like that, to make sure there's no bed bugs in the seats.
Yeah, I mean, forgive my ignorance because I've never encountered them. Do they give little bites to the body, do they?
Sometimes the first thing that you realise is you'll have bites on your exposed parts of the skin in the bed, and you'll see little blood spots on the sheets. Bed bugs, people think of them, that there's the bed mite or the dust mites, which everybody has, doesn't really cause a problem. Bed bugs are quite visible, and they often build up they build up to such numbers in some houses. People think of them as their little pets. There's mental conditions of people, and if they build up in one flat, in a big block of flats, then all of a sudden you'll have an explosion because they'll travel between the flats.
Gosh. You mentioned ants a moment ago, and you alighted on bees and wasps. It's funny, bees are popular, wasps aren't popular. I've had people in the past when I've had a wasp nest suddenly appear at the side of the house. You know, I wouldn't necessarily want it to go anywhere, but if there's a danger of being stung and it's an area that you visit frequently, you've got to deal with it, haven't you?
This is it. We say we deal with public health pests, and we only really deal with them when they're a danger. Most of our work is prevention rather than cure. I mean, the Americans have it right. If you see a pest control van outside a restaurant, you go and eat there. You know they're taking care. Over here, we seem to have a different attitude, and we would like to change that attitude, because every restaurant, every hotel, every school, every office block, every radio studio has a pest control contract for prevention rather than cure.
Yeah, with bees, do you actually, or do you ever move the queen and move the colony somewhere else?
We deal with beekeepers, and we'll get a beekeeper in to move the queen. We do not want to damage the honeybees in particular. Have got enough problems of their own
Exactly, they're
nowadays.
dying out. Other insects I want to mention in passing, clothes moths. I mean, we've had moths in our house in the past, and it's such a pain. You've got a nice outfit, you get it out of the wardrobe and want to wear it, and there's a hole nibbled in it. It's not the moth itself, it's the grub that causes
It's the larva that causes the problem.
Yeah.
Granny in the old days used to take her rugs out and put them on the clothesline on a bright sunny day and bash them. And that was to get rid of the clothes moth, because the clothes moth want to go to the darkest place, and when it's in the sun and you bash them, they just used to fall out. Nowadays, of course, we don't do that. They're often found behind bookcases, behind bureaus, behind sofas, where we don't move them out all the time. And that when you do move them out, you suddenly find the hole in the carpet. The best thing to do with clothing is to put it into a vacuum sealed bag, because you put away your winter woolies now at this time of year, although it's cold today, and then you don't get them out again until maybe October, November time, by which time they've all been nibbled away because you haven't looked at them. You should open the drawers at least once a month, turn the clothes over, move them, keep disturbing them. Don't let the moths build up.
One other animal of a small nature I want to mention, and that's the cockroach. Years ago, I was in Nice in the south of France, and we stayed at a place, and the kitchen was infested with cockroaches. I mean, they are traditionally associated with kitchens, aren't they?
No.
Well, to my mind, they are.
Yeah, I was in Ibiza last week, 2 weeks ago, and they're cockroaches. You see them in the street, the big American cockroaches. You see them across the whole of many of the Greek islands. That's the American cockroach. Over here, the German cockroach is the steam fly, and you get them in blocks of flats and hospitals. They're very, very common.
They seem indestructible.
No, you can kill them. People say, "Oh, I trod on it, and all the babies then survived and came out." It's because the egg case. Cockroaches don't go through what many insects go through, which is egg, larva, pupa, adult. They go egg, mini baby. So there's none of that in-between stage. And that's the thing. You don't see the baby cockroaches because they're the size of a pinhead. And they'll get behind cracks, crevices, and it's only when they build up to the bigger numbers that you start seeing them again.
Oh, they give me the creeps. Well, we'll hear about some more of the pests that you deal with after this. That is Pink and Walk Me Home. Steve Yabsley Show, your local radio station. My guest at the moment is Paul Bates, who is a pest control expert. And we're talking about various animals that can cause havoc in the house. Let's talk about some of the bigger ones. I mean, the classic ones are mice and rats. And I've dealt with, I know, about a dozen mice over the years in various homes I've had. And we've had rats once. Rats, I presume, is the biggest problem because of the damage they can cause, is it?
No, rats is the biggest problem because of people's perception of them. Rats tend not to want to be in houses, but they get the bad publicity. In fact, squirrels do far more damage in property than rats do.
Uh-huh.
But squirrels don't get that bad publicity because they've got this lovely furry tail, and people think, but they're an invasive species. Of course, they've taken out our red squirrel,
Yes.
which is protected nowadays. But squirrels get into a loft space, and we've walked across joists where there've been half moons chewed out by the squirrels, which makes the entire loft unsafe.
Golly. And you can legally exterminate them, can you, or move them on? I mean, what's the position as far as actually dealing with them goes?
Grey squirrels can be trapped and destroyed. What people often don't realise when they use these humane traps for mice is it's actually illegal to trap a rodent, a pest rodent, and then release it back into the wild.
Well, they don't put that on the packet.
No, they don't. It's they're pest species, and the trouble is with rats, mice, squirrels. They're all rodents, and rodent comes from rodentere, the Latin to gnaw, and that's what they do. And a rat will go through lead pipe quite easily. In fact, we're dealing with a new pest now in Buckinghamshire with one of the companies that we own, called the edible dormouse,
Blimey.
which causes massive problems in houses in Buckinghamshire. They're edible dormice. I thought they would be tiny little things. They're the size of a small squirrel. They're edible dormice because they sleep for 8 months a year. They hibernate. The Romans used to put them in barrels when they went out on their long sailing journeys, and of course they had fresh meat all the time.
Gosh.
But they get into properties in Buckinghamshire, and they're causing massive damage, and we're having to learn a lot about them.
What about the danger to your men and women who go out? Because a friend of mine, in fact, old girlfriend of mine, her mum had a squirrel in the house, and it was behind the sofa. She went down to pick it up, and it clamped onto her finger, and she had to go to hospital with the squirrel attached to her finger to have it removed because it would not release its grip.
No. Yeah. You take care. You take a lot of care. All our guys are well trained, and you don't go near something like that. If it's trapped indoors, the best thing to do is open the windows, open the doors, and try and get it out. Or you get somebody professional in to actually deal with it there. With regards to mice, there's a lot of building going on in London at the moment, and some of the new buildings have got mice in before anybody moves in there. Modern buildings are built on 18-inch floating floors with all the services going underneath them. You've got great gaps above the ceilings, stud partition walls. All of these are really motorways for mice. And that's where we come in for prevention rather than cure.
We must mention birds as well, because several species of birds have caused problems over the years. What are your big hitters? What you get called out for the most?
The feral pigeon is the one that we have to do most work against. In private houses, it's often if there's been a slipped tile, people will suddenly hear noises in the loft, and you go up there and there'll be 2 or 3 inches of pigeon fouling all over the place, and we have to get the pigeons out and then clear the fouling. It's something careers advisors never give you any advice on when you leave school, is it? Would you like to go into a job clearing pigeon fouling? But we go into royal palaces or drug squats. Pests really know no boundaries.
Interesting, on your website, you also mentioned parakeets.
They are becoming a massive problem. People look at them in the trees, think, aren't they pretty, these lovely green birds?
This is particularly in London, isn't it, or Hampshire?
It's across London and the southeast, and they're now spreading. Yeah. I mean, the apocryphal story is that they go back to the filming of The African Queen, and some were released after it was being filmed in Shepperton Studios. It was known that Jimi Hendrix kept some, and they
so
escaped
he's to blame.
as well. There's a lot of different stories, but in London now they are a massive problem. Kent farmers in the orchards are really worried because a flock of parakeets will destroy an orchard of apples overnight. They just land on the tree, take one peck out of each apple, and that's it. And again, they're moving our native birds out of their natural habitats. They'll take over the holes in trees for nesting.
What about the changing climate in this country? It's certainly warming up, and that's meant that some animals which would normally have a more southerly range have been coming towards us, haven't they?
Yeah, we call that profit. Um, no, there's a lot of problems now. The Asian hornet is a reportable pest
That's
nowadays.
nasty.
They're very nasty, and they will cause damage to the honeybee population because they will wait outside and they will kill the honeybees to get to the honey. And they're a reportable pest nowadays. We've got many different varieties of ants now coming over. Tropical ants, the Pharaoh ant, um, which feeds on high protein. Used to have a problem in old Victorian hospitals where they'd be feeding on spilt blood.
Oh,
And one of the ways that we used to get rid of them was mixing boric acid with raw minced liver. It's much more technical nowadays, but
yeah. But at the end of the day, you cannot ignore these pests because they won't go away and they will undermine the value of your property, won't they, if you don't
well,
deal with it?
that's right. I mean, we as a company go down the line of if we can exclude them from the property first, that's the best thing to do. If they're in a property, let's restrict their movement, and as a last resort, then we go to destruction. Because well, one of our quality manager, he's a member of the Sussex Ornithological Society. We're members of the Bat Conservation Trust. If you've got bats in a loft, we do not go in that loft at all because we want to protect our native species.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming in today, Paul. Really interesting. Every success in the future.
Pleasure.